Today, we unravel the gripping tale of twisted love triangle murder. Wife becomes victim of fatal murder. Dive into a world of deception, betrayal, and deadly secrets as we follow Emily Harris's harrowing journey from heartbreak to justice. How far will someone go for power and love? Stay tuned to find out. Who could have wanted David Harris dead, and why did his life end so tragically? What secrets did Detective Thompson uncover that turned the investigation upside down? How did Emily cope with the shocking revelations about her husband's affair and the web of lies surrounding his death? Could David's business partner, Richard, have orchestrated a sinister plot to seize control of their company? Will the true mastermind behind David's murder be brought to justice, or is there another twist in this deadly tale? The sun set gently over the quaint suburban neighborhood, casting a golden hue across the rows of neatly kept lawns and pastel-painted houses. In one such house, Emily Harris stood at the kitchen sink, her hands busy washing the last of the dinner dishes. She glanced out the window, watching children playing in the yard across the street. Her life seemed picture-perfect, but beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Emily had been married to David for 10 years. They had met in college and had quickly fallen in love, their shared dreams and ambitions binding them together. Now, in their mid-30s, they had what appeared to be an ideal life, a beautiful home, successful careers, and a close-knit circle of friends. Yet, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As David entered the kitchen, Emily's heart tightened. He was charming and handsome, with an easy smile that had won her over all those years ago. But lately, he had become distant, his attentions elsewhere. Emily tried to dismiss her suspicions as paranoia, but the nagging doubt in her mind wouldn't go away. "Hey, hon," David said, kissing her on the cheek. "I've got a late meeting tonight. Don't wait up for me." Emily forced a smile. "Okay, be safe." David grabbed his briefcase and left, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts. She walked to their bedroom and opened David's closet, rummaging through his belongings. Her hands trembled as she found what she was looking for, a receipt for an expensive necklace, one she had never seen before. Her heart sank. The evidence of an affair was becoming undeniable. The next morning, Emily decided to confront David. She couldn't live with the deception any longer. As they sat at the breakfast table, she took a deep breath and summoned the courage to speak. "David, we need to talk." David looked up from his coffee, his expression wary. "What's wrong?" "I found this," Emily said, placing the receipt on the table between them. "Who is she?" David's face paled. For a moment, he was speechless, but then he sighed deeply. "Her name is Sarah. We met at a conference 6 months ago." Emily felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over her. "How could you do this to us?" "To me?" David's eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Emily. I never meant for this to happen. It just did." Emily stood up, unable to contain her emotions. "You need to end it, David. If you want to save our marriage, you need to end it." David nodded, his face somber. "I will. I promise." Despite his assurances, Emily's trust in David was shattered. She felt like a stranger in her own life, the foundation of her marriage crumbling beneath her feet. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't help but wonder how things had gone so wrong. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and heartbreak. Little did she know, the storm was just beginning. The days following the confrontation were tense and filled with uncertainty. David had promised to end the affair, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. She tried to carry on with her daily routine, but everything felt different, tainted by the knowledge of David's infidelity. Emily immersed herself in her work, hoping to find some semblance of normalcy. She worked as a graphic designer, a job she loved for its creativity and flexibility. But even her passion couldn't distract her from the turmoil at home. She found herself constantly checking her phone, looking for messages from David that might give her some reassurance. David, on the other hand, was struggling to keep up appearances. He had ended things with Sarah, but the guilt and shame weighed heavily on him. At work, he was distracted, making mistakes and missing deadlines. His colleagues noticed the change but said nothing, sensing that something personal was amiss. One evening, Emily received a call from Sarah. The voice on the other end was calm but determined. "Emily, this is Sarah. We need to talk." Emily's heart raced. "What do you want?" "I think you deserve to know the whole truth," Sarah said. "Can we meet?" Reluctantly, Emily agreed. They met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. Emily arrived early, her mind swirling with questions. When Sarah walked in, Emily was struck by how ordinary she looked, nothing like the seductive image she had imagined. "Thank you for meeting me," Sarah said, sitting down across from Emily. "I know this is difficult." Emily nodded, her throat tight. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I realized I was wrong," Sarah replied. "I thought David and I had something special, but I see now that I was just a distraction for him. I wanted you to know that it's really over between us." Emily listened as Sarah recounted the affair in painful detail, the stolen moments, the secret rendezvous, the lies they told to keep it hidden. It was excruciating, but in some strange way, it also gave her a sense of closure. "Thank you for telling me," Emily said finally. "I just hope we can move past this." After their meeting, Emily felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness. She knew that rebuilding her marriage would be a long and difficult process. But at least now, she had a clearer picture of what had happened. Back at home, Emily and David had another heart-to-heart conversation. They spoke openly about their feelings, their fears, and their hopes for the future. David promised to do whatever it took to regain Emily's trust, and Emily, though still hurt, agreed to try and work things out. For a while, it seemed like they might be able to rebuild what was broken. But the wounds were deep, and the scars would take time to heal. Emily found herself second-guessing David's every move, and David felt like he was constantly walking on eggshells. One night, as they lay in bed, Emily turned to David. "Do you think we'll ever be the same again?" David looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I don't know, Emily. But I want to try. I want to make things right." Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "Me too. I just hope it's enough." Despite their efforts, the trust between them continued to erode. The affair had opened up old wounds and created new ones. Emily couldn't help but feel that David was hiding something from her, and David couldn't shake the guilt that consumed him. As the weeks turned into months, the tension between them grew. They argued more frequently, the love they once shared overshadowed by suspicion and resentment. Emily found herself questioning everything: her marriage, her life, her choices. And then, one fateful night, the storm that had been brewing finally broke. It was late, and David hadn't come home from work. Emily's mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrible than the last. She tried calling him, but there was no answer. Desperate, she drove to his office, only to find it dark and empty. Panic set in as she realized she had no idea where he was or what he was doing. She drove aimlessly through the city, her mind a whirlwind of fear and anger. Finally, she returned home, exhausted and defeated. As she entered the house, she noticed something out of place: a broken vase, shards of glass scattered across the floor. Her heart pounded as she realized that someone had been there. She called out for David, but there was no response. She searched the house, her fear growing with each step. And then she found him, lying motionless on the living room floor, a pool of blood spreading around him. Emily's scream echoed through the empty house, a sound of pure anguish and terror. She dropped to her knees beside David, her hands trembling as she tried to find a pulse. But it was too late. David was dead. Emily sat on the floor, her world collapsing around her as she cradled David's lifeless body. The piercing wail of sirens grew louder, and within minutes, the police had arrived, followed closely by paramedics. The flashing lights painted the scene in an eerie red and blue glow, a stark contrast to the horror inside the Harris home. Detective Mark Thompson, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving the most complex cases, arrived on the scene. He surveyed the room, taking in the broken vase, the blood, and the distraught woman clutching her dead husband. He approached Emily cautiously, his expression a mix of compassion and professional detachment. "Mrs. Harris," he said gently, "I'm Detective Thompson. Can you tell me what happened?" Emily's voice trembled as she recounted the events leading up to her discovery of David's body. She spoke of the broken vase, her desperate search for him, and the gut-wrenching moment she found him lying in a pool of blood. "Did David have any enemies? Anyone who might have wanted to hurt him?" Thompson asked. Emily shook her head. "Not that I know of. He was having an affair, but he said it was over." Thompson's ears perked up at this. "An affair? With whom?" "Her name is Sarah," Emily replied. "I met her a few weeks ago. She told me it was over." Thompson nodded, making a mental note to follow up with Sarah. "Thank you, Mrs. Harris. I know this is hard, but we'll do everything we can to find out what happened." As the forensic team began their work, Thompson took a closer look at the crime scene. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that David might have known his killer. He examined the broken vase, noting the angle and force with which it had shattered. It seemed likely that a struggle had taken place. Meanwhile, Emily was taken to the police station for further questioning. As she sat in the sterile interrogation room, her mind raced with questions and fears. Who could have done this? And why? Detective Thompson entered the room, carrying a notepad and a sympathetic expression. "Emily, I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you a few more questions. Can you tell me more about your relationship with David? How were things between you two?" Emily hesitated, then sighed. "We were having problems. Ever since I found out about the affair, things have been tense. We argued a lot. But I never thought it would come to this." "Did David ever mention anyone threatening him or acting suspiciously?" Thompson asked. "No," Emily replied. "He was more secretive than usual, but I thought it was just because of the affair." Thompson nodded, jotting down notes. "Thank you, Emily. We're going to look into every possibility. In the meantime, is there anyone you can stay with? Friends or family?" Emily thought for a moment. "My sister, Linda. I'll stay with her." "Good," Thompson said. "We'll keep you updated on the investigation." Back at the crime scene, the forensic team had discovered several pieces of crucial evidence. There were fingerprints on the broken vase that didn't belong to Emily or David. Additionally, they found a partial footprint near the back door, suggesting that the killer might have fled that way. Detective Thompson decided it was time to pay Sarah a visit. He drove to her apartment, a modest place on the other side of town. Sarah answered the door, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw the detective. "Miss Sarah, I'm Detective Thompson. I need to ask you a few questions about David Harris." Sarah's face turned pale. Is he okay?" "I'm afraid he's been murdered," Thompson said, watching her reaction closely. Sarah gasped, tears welling up in her eyes. "Oh my God, no. I can't believe it. Can I come in?" Thompson asked. Sarah nodded and stepped aside, allowing the detective into her apartment. He took a seat on the couch, while Sarah sat across from him, visibly shaken. "Sarah, can you tell me about your relationship with David? When did it start, and when did it end?" Thompson asked. "It started about 6 months ago," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "We met at a conference. It was a mistake. I thought I loved him, but when I met Emily, I realized how wrong it was. I ended it 2 weeks ago. Did David ever mention anyone threatening him or acting suspiciously? Thompson inquired. No, Sarah replied. But he did seem on edge lately. I thought it was because of the affair. Thompson made a note of this. Where were you last night, around the time of the murder? I was at home, Sarah said. Alone. Can anyone verify that? Thompson asked. Sarah shook her head. No, but I swear I didn't do this. I loved him, even though I knew it was wrong. Thompson nodded. Thank you, Sarah. We'll be in touch. As Thompson left Sarah's apartment, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this case than met the eye. He returned to the station, where the forensic team was analyzing the evidence. The fingerprints on the vase belonged to an unknown male, and the footprint was consistent with a size 10 shoe. Thompson ordered a background check on Sarah and David, hoping to find any connections that might lead to a suspect. He also reviewed the security footage from the area around the Harris home, looking for any clues. The investigation was just beginning, but Thompson was determined to uncover the truth. As he sifted through the evidence and interviewed more witnesses, a complex web of lies, jealousy, and betrayal began to emerge. And at the center of it all was a twisted love triangle that had ended in murder. Detective Mark Thompson delved into the investigation with a keen eye for detail. He began by interviewing David's colleagues, friends, and family, gathering insights into his life and potential enemies. One name kept surfacing: Richard, David's business partner. Richard had a reputation for being ruthless in business, and there were rumors of a falling out between him and David. Thompson decided to pay Richard a visit. At Richard's upscale office, Thompson noticed the tension in the air as soon as he mentioned David's murder. Richard, can you account for your whereabouts last night? Thompson asked. I was at a business dinner until late. You can check with my colleagues, Richard replied smoothly, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Thompson noted the alibi but remained suspicious. He decided to follow up with the colleagues and found that Richard's story checked out, leaving him with more questions than answers. Meanwhile, forensic analysis revealed that the fingerprints on the vase did not match Richard's, further complicating the case. Back at the station, Thompson reviewed the security footage from the night of the murder. After hours of painstaking examination, he spotted a figure wearing a hoodie near the Harris home. The figure's face was obscured, but the size and build suggested a male. The detective sent the footage for enhancement, hoping to glean more details. Thompson's next lead came from David's phone records, which showed numerous calls to an unknown number in the days leading up to his death. Tracing the number led Thompson to a burner phone, but the trail went cold. Frustrated but undeterred, Thompson kept digging. Emily, meanwhile, was struggling with grief and fear. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. One evening, she noticed a car parked near her sister's house, the same car she had seen multiple times since David's death. Her heart raced as she dialed Thompson's number. Detective, I think someone's following me, Emily whispered, panic in her voice. Thompson responded immediately, sending a patrol car to check the area. The car was gone by the time they arrived, but Emily's tip gave Thompson a new angle to pursue. He intensified his focus on David's personal life, uncovering a history of financial troubles and strained relationships. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A witness came forward, claiming to have seen a man arguing with David outside his office a week before the murder. The description matched the figure from the security footage, and the witness identified the man as Greg, a former employee who had been fired by David under contentious circumstances. Thompson tracked Greg down and brought him in for questioning. Under pressure, Greg admitted to the confrontation but denied any involvement in the murder. His alibi for the night of the murder checked out, but Thompson wasn't convinced. He ordered a deeper investigation into Greg's background and connections. As the pieces of the puzzle slowly came together, Thompson knew he was getting closer to the truth. The tangled web of deceit, betrayal, and hidden motives was starting to unravel, and with it, the identity of the killer who had shattered Emily's life. The detective's journey was far from over, but he could sense the end was in sight. He just needed to keep pushing, digging deeper, and connecting the dots that would lead to the shocking revelation of the murderer's identity. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial of David Harris's murder began. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Linda Evans, was confident they had a strong case against Greg, the former employee and now prime suspect. Emily sat in the front row, her heart pounding, seeking closure and justice for her husband. Detective Thompson took the stand first, outlining the investigation that led to Greg's arrest. He detailed the evidence, the security footage, the witness testimony, and Greg's suspicious behavior. The jury listened intently, absorbing every word. Next, the prosecution called the forensic expert, who explained how Greg's fingerprints were found on a piece of glass near the crime scene. This evidence was crucial in placing Greg at the scene of the crime on the night of the murder. Greg's defense attorney, James Miller, countered by questioning the reliability of the witness and the possibility of evidence tampering. He painted Greg as a victim of circumstantial evidence and argued that the prosecution had no solid proof of Greg's involvement in the murder. Then, the defense called Sarah to the stand. Her presence added a new layer of tension to the trial. Under questioning, she confirmed her affair with David and admitted to the confrontation with Emily. However, she maintained her innocence, insisting she had no reason to kill David. The defense tried to cast doubt on Emily's credibility, suggesting her grief and anger over the affair might have clouded her judgment. Emily, called to the stand, held her composure, describing the night she found David and her interactions with Greg and Sarah. Her testimony was emotional but unwavering. As the trial progressed, an unexpected twist emerged. The prosecution presented new evidence, a series of emails between Greg and Richard, David's business partner. The emails revealed a plot to oust David from the company and hinted at a deeper conspiracy. Richard was subpoenaed and took the stand, visibly nervous. Under intense questioning, he admitted to the plan to force David out but denied any involvement in the murder. The courtroom was electrified as the prosecution suggested that Greg and Richard had conspired to kill David when their initial plan failed. Greg, sensing the walls closing in, requested to take the stand. He confessed to arguing with David but vehemently denied killing him. He claimed Richard had manipulated him and that Richard had more to gain from David's death. The prosecution seized on this, highlighting Richard's motive and opportunity. The defense scrambled to protect their client, but the damage was done. The jury was left with a tangled web of motives and conflicting testimonies. In the closing arguments, D.A. Evans urged the jury to see through the defense's smoke and mirrors and focus on the evidence pointing to Greg's guilt. Miller, for the defense, implored the jury to consider the possibility of Richard's greater involvement and the lack of concrete proof against Greg. The jury deliberated for hours, the tension in the courtroom palpable. When they finally returned, the foreman announced their verdict, guilty of second-degree murder for Greg, but with a strong recommendation to investigate Richard further. As Greg was led away in handcuffs, Emily felt a mix of relief and lingering uncertainty. Justice had been served, but the full truth still seemed just out of reach. Detective Thompson approached her, promising to continue investigating Richard's role. The courtroom trial had ended, but the quest for complete justice was far from over. Emily knew she had to find peace with what had been uncovered, even as the shadows of unanswered questions loomed over her. Despite the trial's outcome, Detective Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. He continued to dig into Richard's background and business dealings, determined to uncover the truth. Emily, though relieved by the guilty verdict, shared Thompson's lingering doubts and cooperated fully with the ongoing investigation. Thompson's persistence paid off when he discovered a series of financial transactions linking Richard to a known criminal, Lucas Green. Lucas had a reputation for handling dirty work for powerful individuals. Thompson decided it was time to confront Richard with this new evidence. He arranged for Richard to come to the station for a follow-up interview. Richard arrived, confident and composed, but his demeanor shifted when Thompson presented the evidence of his financial dealings with Lucas. "Care to explain these transactions?" Thompson asked, sliding the documents across the table. Richard's face paled. I don't know what you're talking about." "Cut the crap, Richard. We have proof you paid Lucas Green a significant amount of money around the time of David's murder," Thompson pressed. Under pressure, Richard finally cracked. He confessed that he had hired Lucas to scare David into leaving the company. "I didn't want him dead," Richard insisted. "But Lucas went too far. He was supposed to intimidate David, make him leave on his own." Thompson had Lucas picked up and brought in for questioning. Under the weight of the evidence and the threat of a harsh sentence, Lucas confessed to the murder. He admitted that he had been instructed to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. In his confession, he detailed how he had confronted David, and when the situation escalated, he struck David with the vase, killing him. With Lucas's confession, Thompson had the final piece of the puzzle. The conspiracy was laid bare. Richard's desire to control the company had led him to hire Lucas, whose actions had spiraled into murder. Both men were arrested and charged, with Lucas facing murder charges and Richard facing charges of conspiracy and manslaughter. Thompson visited Emily to inform her of the breakthrough. She listened in silence, her emotions a mix of relief, anger, and sadness. "So, it was all about the company?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thompson nodded. "Yes, but greed and ambition took it to a deadly level. I'm sorry for everything you've been through." Emily sighed, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Detective. I just want to put this behind me." As the news broke, the community reacted with shock and disbelief. The finality of the arrests brought a sense of closure, but the scars of betrayal and loss would take time to heal. Emily returned to her home, trying to rebuild her life from the ashes. She found solace in the support of her sister and friends, and in the knowledge that justice, though delayed, had been served. Hey, Truth in Crime Case Solvers. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe.